Welcome to the Michael Ouzas podcast. Welcome to the Michael Ouzas podcast. Today we welcome David Cinelli. David and I met way back at a goalie school. He's actually a coach of mine years and years ago. He played hockey at St. Mike's, went on to play university. He's been on HGTV's Hot Market and is now in the executive circle at Royal LePage. We're both also Royal LePage Signature agents. Welcome to the Michael Ouzas podcast, David Cinelli.
Hey, thanks, buddy. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too. So I kind of want to go way back here and talk about hockey a little bit and talk about, I mean, you coached me probably about 25 years ago, which is pretty crazy to think. How did you become a goalie? Like, where did that journey start? And then talk about your career and how you got into college.
Like all the other kids, we started playing hockey, I guess, around 4 years old. And then, everyone gets a turn in net. And it was funny. Then I played a couple of games, and it was good, I guess. And this is around 7 years old, and I was playing, and the select team above us didn't have a goalie, and they saw they played, and they liked me so much that they pulled me. I was playing select at Humber Valley, here in Etobicoke, and then from there I just then I just played underage AA from there, and then went to AAA, and then from there I just played AAA all the way out and played juniors. Was strapped to the OHL, but I went a different route than you did. I wanted to go university route, and ended up playing Wisconsin, and it's funny. As a goalie, though, I was a kid like you, but I didn't want to play net. I wanted to score goals. I wanted to be all over the ice, and I remember going to a couple of camps and stuff too. And then people were like, I remember the coach going, it's like, hey. Same thing with real estate. I didn't want to, we've talked this before. I didn't want to be a realtor because I had so many bad real estate experiences. And at some point they're like, this is what you're good at, just do it. And that's kind of how I fell into it. And just kind of the rest is history with hockey, right? So,
That's pretty awesome. Yeah. For me, I was like, I wanted to be a goalie from the get-go. I don't know. I had it in me like 6 games in. I was like,
yeah, but you're crazier than I am. I'm pretty crazy. Maybe you're maybe a little more nuts than me. Maybe that's what it was.
I don't know. I've fast forward literally over 30 years, and yes, I was doing it. But that's pretty cool. And then, so you went to school. What was your path like after school? So did you pursue more hockey? Did you get into work?
I did. I did. So for me, it was like I always wanted to play pro for 1 year. I know you played a little longer than I did too. But after my last year university, I actually pulled my groin pretty bad, and the coach really wasn't playing me. He was kind of screwing me over a little bit, but that's a different story. But when I pulled my groin, I only played like a game and 2/3 really. So if I wanted to go back to Canadian University, I was going to try to see if I can get back my red card, because you get a medical red card, right? But I had a tryout in Odessa, Texas, coming up. And Odessa, Texas, they're one of the farm teams of the Edmonton Oilers. And before I had my tryout, I talked to the coach who had recruited me before I went to University of the States. He recruited me for the University of Waterloo. And he just liked the way I played, and, just knew the family. And he's like, hey, so he goes, while you're in Wisconsin, so I went to the University of Wisconsin, Stevens Point, great Division III school. They just won a number of national championships. It was a great time. It was amazing. The hockey was amazing. We had all Division I players on our team. It was just, even I turned down a Division I scholarship to go to this Division III school. That's how good it was. It was just awesome. But he asked me, he goes, when you're in Wisconsin, did you get married? I said, no. Why? And he's like, well, if you're married and you had American citizenship, it's easier for me to sign you and keep you on the team. I said, well, why is that? It's like very similar to the CFL here in the U.S. system. He's like, if we have a quota of a certain amount of Americans we can have on the team. And he goes, let's be honest, you're going to be our backup goalie. Our starting goalie is Canadian. So if you're American, I don't have to use one of your Canadian cards on you. So I was kind of behind the eight ball, kind of told me, he's like, well, you can come to try out, you can try out, and let's see how it goes. But the guy's right, was kind of on the wall. So in the meantime, we went to this, I went to this tournament, and we went with a traveling team to Europe. And because my parents were both born in Italy. And we tried to get my talent decision before I left, and the consulate at that time, which was 2002, was just not having it. The guy sat back with a cigarette and blowing smoke in my parents' face. He's like, "Your son only wants this citizenship so he can play hockey." My parents, what's wrong with that, right? And they're like, and he's just like, no, he wouldn't give it to us. Anyway, so we played about 13 games and traveling all through France and Germany, and I had 2 Italian teams that wanted to sign me, and the coach was all over me because if I get signed, he also gets paid. So I wanted to stay. I was there for like 2.5 weeks and stuff, but this consulate just said nope. So he was a little upset at me too. So I flew back, went to Odessa, Texas, and it was just me and the other 2 goalies. And at that point, it was kind of the Central Hockey League. I don't know if you played in the Central. it was an interesting time because teams were folding. There was literally a team that was uh, they didn't pay. They were going bankrupt, and the repo guys came in. They started peeling the boards and taking the boards. This is what the league was like. So one of the games we were supposed to play, this exhibition game, we got reduced to one game, exhibition game, because the other teams were getting repo. The rink was getting repo. That's how bad this league was, right? And it's like the farm team of the farm team. So it's like you think that there's money there. It's like no. Anyway, long story short, we each goalie got to play one period. I was the only one. I got a shutout. I stopped 16 saves. I almost got an assist. It was great, and I got released the next day. So I came back, and then I started working for John Elkin is how me and you met through the hockey. It was his right hand man for a bit, and then so I went back, started coaching with John. And John came up to me one day. He's like, "Hey, do you still want to play pro?" I said, "Sure." And he's like, "Would you go to tonight? Quad City Mallards into goalie." So I went, packed my stuff up, drove out in the States, backed up a couple of games, and then they had so Quad City Mallards with the U-Haul at the time was one of the top teams, and they were on a losing streak, which wasn't good. Their top goalies hurt, so they literally went in after the second game and me backing up. They basically got rid of everybody and gave me my check, and they said, "Thanks for showing up, Dave, but we just brought in two veteran goalies to bring home, like steer the ship." I'm like, "Okay." I came back, started working for John again, and then I signed again with Odessa for for the playoff as an emergency goalie, and that was pretty much it. My dad came home one day when I was coaching and said, either you go back to school, man, or start paying room and board. So at that point, I decided to do my MBA because I have a business degree and a minor in math. So I have a bachelor of science degree, which is business and math. But but I didn't know what to do with my life. I didn't like I just, it wasn't my goal was to play pro and then try to figure out life afterwards, right? So I didn't really know what my passion was, to be honest with you. And then I ended up going to do my MBA for a year at Laurier, and then I started working in the corporate world, and I was an analyst for 10 years.
Wow, that's quite the journey. I mean, it's so funny. I do remember the Central League when I was in the Coast. It was the Central League in the Coast. The U-Haul at that point was debunked, and my first year in the Coast, actually, my team went bankrupt and folded. So, and then the new team.
Did they go in and steal your arena boards and your glass up? Like, I
No,
couldn't believe that actually happened.
no, they didn't. But they shipped us all out, and yeah, it was quite the interesting time. But I mean, so much to unpack there. So yeah, I mean, pro is it's so interesting because there's a ton of stories like that of like it's just there's so many portions of it where it's like you get an opportunity, your talent, and all that stuff has to kind of click at the same time to stick. And there's so many great players along the way that might not get that opportunity that they're looking for at the right time. And then it's just a matter of do you keep plugging it out or do you move on to other things? And so for you came back, did your MBA, and now let's talk corporate world. What was that like? What was that change from? You went from a hockey,
Very different
hockey
life.
dream to corporate. Like what is that like? Like I've never had a I always joke like I've never had like a real 9 to 5 job. So what does that look like?
Horrible. It was um, I'm always pretty self-motivated, and I like to set up my own schedules. But having somebody set for you and having to be someplace to sit down all the time when you don't have work, it's never been my forte. Like you make yourself look busy. That's kind of sometimes what it was. It was pretty. It was interesting. I listen. At the end of the day, I appreciate everything that the people, the opportunities that people gave me, and it was just wasn't the greatest fit for me. So what happened for me was, when I did my MBA, I took about 6 marketing courses out of my elective. I really liked marketing, so I tried to get into some marketing stuff. But if you ever had a chance to look at marketing stuff, there's some shitty jobs, and people are like, oh, it's marketing. In reality, you're doing door-to-door sales, and I'm like, I didn't want to do that. It was pretty bad. Um, so a friend of mine that I did my MBA with called me up one day, and her dad worked at Toronto Hydro. She's like, "Hey, listen, I'm like, I know, finance isn't like you're good at math, you're good at finance. I know it's not your passion, but do you want a job in the meantime?" And at this point, I never had a big boy job either. This is my first big boy job. I said it's only supposed to be like a 3 or 6 month contract, and it was for a subsidiary for Toronto Hydro. Like, long story short, there was I'm gonna keep saying that, but anyway, long story short, there was the energy board had opened up for Toronto to have free market. Basically, you were supposed to be able to not have a set price for energy. And I think Ernie Eves came in, and that only lasted like a month and a half. So Toronto Hydro had the subsidiary in which it was their retail. So they're basically supposed to be in that space, buying, selling contracts and doing that. Well, I think Ernie Eves, after a month, said, no, this is not going to happen. He shut it down. So the company had to basically, they were getting defunct, so they had to basically de-roll them. My job was to go in and audit all the books and making sure that billing, everyone got billed, because the company was a mess. Like no one, they never had time to bill people properly and stuff. And it's like, so I got to use my MBA skills, like my Excel skills. I really honed in on that. And then I was looking to leave, but let me back that up for a second. My first big boy check was a really eye opener. And because you never haven't had experiences, we worked a lot, like, hockey schools. I did everything you can imagine. I worked in electrical. I was a server for coffee. I manufactured ice cream. I served ice cream. I served coffee. I was a bouncer. I helped brew beer. I was a prep cook. I was what's called a dishwasher, busboy. I worked in campus security when I was in the States too. So you name it, I've done a lot of jobs. Like with even electrical, I've done some like but most of the jobs I got were either like some sort of cash or some sort of like student thing. It wasn't like you weren't getting taxes. It wasn't your job, right? It wasn't like a big boy job, we call it. So when I got my first check as a big boy job, and I'm supposed to make a certain amount of money, more than half of it was gone to taxes. And I'm like, what the hell is this shit? Like what is this? And I was saying to look at my dad. He's like, yeah, like that's what happens when you work for somebody else. Like listen, they take EI, they take CPP, they take all this stuff. And at the end of the day, you're left with like less than half of what you got. I'm like, that was a big eye opener. I'm like, at the time, my brother kind of gave me a book called Rich Dad Poor Dad, in which he talks about if you read Rich Dad Poor Dad, I think you have. I think most of us have read at that point. It just broke things down nice and easy for me to know what an asset was and what a liability was. And I realized throughout the book about buying assets and let them work as a passive income. My dad's been doing it for years, so that's how I got into the rental space like right away. So basically, when I got my job, I was still I had to pretend I was a full-time job to get my mortgage. Not pretend, sorry. We had to get a letter from the bank saying like, yeah, he's a contractor, like he's guaranteed for a little bit longer. And I did. I ended up getting a full-time job right after that. Sorry, my light just went on. But that kind of led me to, so I was a contract doing this analyst like for a year and a half, and then I wanted to leave but the big company pulled me up in being an analyst, treasury analyst. So as a treasury analyst, it was a lot of fun in the beginning because my job was kind of what we do now. It was wheeling and dealing with the banks. I had a certain amount of money every day. Like I would forecast how much cash we needed for the day, and then once I had a certain amount of money, I would say, okay, we always the balance in the morning always had to be around plus or minus $1 million. And then what I would see is we would forecast how much money was coming in that day, and then I would invest it out in short-term loans, and make sure you line up all the obligations you needed to, and then excess amount of money it can move further out. And we had to stay within a certain amount of products based on what our basically the board of directors wanted. So there was a little based on risk. So it was a lot of wheeling and dealing and tons of fun. And then in 2008, there was the crisis in the U.S. and some of the products we purchased were underlying of that asset. We had $88 million tied up, and my job changed overnight. Like literally from wheeling and dealing and working wheeling and dealing all morning, and then paying stuff back and forth led to one phone call, and then trying to figure out jobs for me to do, and it was pretty terrible. And then there was nothing for me to do some days, like nothing. And it was like we were trying to find jobs, and then in 2012. There's another problem we had with the energy board, in which we had to fire 20% of our workforce, including my VP that brought me in. And some of the people got fired. I ended up taking over their jobs, and I started getting stuff I really didn't want to do. Like, wasn't as much fun, like accounting stuff. And it was like it was a job, it was fine, but I was always looking for ways to get out. But at the time, my wife started her own business, and she was a photographer, and it was. She didn't have any of the benefits, so my job was basically to keep the money afloat, make sure everyone had benefits, the kids were safe. And then 2014, I finally, once I've already been doing real estate, because when my first purchase back, I first got this job till now, I was always wheeling and dealing in real estate. So I thought about getting into real estate because I really, really liked it. So by the time I got packaged out, I was already doing real estate for 10 years on the side. So that's how I
Wow.
kind of started it. Yeah, I know it's a long story, but that's kind of how it worked
It's
out.
cool. No, it's great. It's amazing to like flow through that journey, right? So you've done a bunch of other stuff and kind of realize like where at the end like where your passion ultimately lies, and it took you
I tried to fight it too, bud, because I had. Well, you've seen people like in the industry now. There's a lot of bad realtors. There's 60,000 of us. There's not. I'd say like what, maybe 10,000 of us are actually competent. Like, let's be honest, right? Like we've had these conversations before, and it's like literally some people don't call you back. And I had a lot of these bad realtors, and what I tried to do was I tried to make a business, right? That was like a property management business, right? I was helping people for the longest time get into investment properties. So I had, when I got packaged out, my idea was to continue doing that, helping people get into investment properties, either help them find them or find a property, fix it up, and create it, turn it into like a triplex or fourplex or something else. Or and then if you did that, when I would do the property management, because I'm already doing the property management for my rental properties, because I had a couple at this point. Um, but the glaring, we just try to figure out how to monetize that. And the one glaring gap was the real estate agent, because I was happening for it. So when we tried to monetize it, that's where all the money was. And again, I didn't know how much realtors made at this point. I didn't even think about it. I just knew that that's, if I got my license, I didn't need to rely on these bad realtors I've dealt with in the past. And it took me up until my third course to realize, like, same thing. My wife comes home, like, I'm like, shit, man, maybe I should be a realtor. She's like, well, it took you long enough. You would be good at this. Why don't you actually try? But I didn't want to be a realtor because of all the bad experiences that I had.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting business, right? And I think I do think that it is improving. I would say, like, I hope it is as well. And I think there is a lot of great agents too, which I think we should mention as well. There are a lot of people
Oh,
who do
amazing.
things the right way, right? And I think that sometimes that one sour taste lingers a little more than the amazing experiences that you get from great realtors. Um,
Absolutely.
can we rewind this a little bit into how, so you got your first place, and like what that process was like for your first time, and because I think that's something that not a lot of people talk about, is like what was the first time like when you first buy that rental property, and then you got to get a tenant in there, and then, like,
Mhm.
dealing with a tenant for the first time. It's a totally
Totally different.
different
Yeah.
thing, right? Like from the get go. So what was that like? What year was it? And then, like, what was the process of getting a renter and stuff like that?
So the first one I ever purchased was with my dad. My dad actually, well, he was lending me the money, gave me the direction, would use his realtor and all that, and so I didn't really have a lot of say into like what property we're picking. We One day he calls me up, and I remember it was like World Juniors, or no, it was Canada was playing. I wanted to watch it. He's like, "This is more important. Come see me down here." I'm like, "All right." So we went to Roncesvalles, and I didn't know, right? I was just like, "Oh, we can't wait like 5 minutes." Didn't realize that at the time there was going to be a bidding war on this property. It was a sixplex, which I still own. It's in Roncesvalles, and literally we had half an hour to go look at the property because the property was already tenanted. So I was fortunate I didn't have to get tenants at the time. But didn't realize, but there's also a problem when you take over somebody's tenants. So that's a different can of worms, because you never know what you're going to get, whether they're happy. And because we're only seeing the half, like, we only saw the property for like 30 minutes. We also didn't have a home inspection at the time. Just like, we didn't, that was just almost non-existent. Like, it was, because you're doing a bidding war, and there was like 4 or 5 offers at the time. And like my dad was just like, we're taking off the home inspection. Okay. We're taking off financing. I'm like, okay, I had no idea what was going on. And this is my first introduction into real estate, which wasn't terrible. But as soon as we got the keys, he's like, okay, you're the realtor. Yeah, so you're the landlord. Go introduce yourself to the tenants. He'd tell me kind of stuff to do, and then he's like, okay, now it's on your own. Um, so I had one of my tenants, the basement was on the first ones to go, and it was interesting. You learn things from the beginning, like looking at what the old school way. My dad was like, oh, you put up a sign, and you just, people call and you go to the door, and you do those stuff too. And I realized quickly it's not how I wanted to run it. And I was like, no, you need pictures, and I started doing things on Kijiji, and then meeting people there, and then I also took some courses and stuff to how to, maximize your time. There was like a 3-day course in which I took about real estate stuff. It was really great. And it was, yeah, you have 3 or 4 people at the same time. Maximize your time. It also shows there's interest in the property, and that's kind of like how I started doing things. And then, yeah, so it was because we started getting problems right away in the property, and it just kind of like, yeah, I talked to my dad. He's like, deal with it. So I was like literally, it was a 25-year-old guy, didn't have any real contacts, lived in Wisconsin for 4 years, then Waterloo for a year. So I didn't really have a lot of my contacts set here. So I had to make my own network, and it was trial by error, right? And I went through a lot of shitty contractors and figured out the way. So it was, and then in 2008 we had a fire in the property, which was a huge undertaking. We had to But I was able to fix the problem. There was a lot of problems I had to fix, and anyway, that also helped with my network and using people and figure out who you can trust and who you can't trust. So I was passing on that knowledge to a lot of my clients and and friends and stuff. So like, oh, here, use this guy I've vetted before.
Yeah, it's an incredible journey when you go on it your own, because then you're always gonna you're, from your referral network standpoint, you're going to refer people that typically you've used and had great experiences with first, right? Because you know them and you've worked with them before.
That's right.
And you've also gone through the process of maybe hiring someone and they don't finish the job properly or whatever. But I think it's incredible. Like at the age of 25, to be dealing with that stuff, and then especially like I would say you're probably before a lot of people in getting properties rented on Kijiji. Like I know it's a thing now, and there's a lot of realtors that do a ton of leases a year. That's where I started as well, with lots of leases, and you're going through that process, and you're posting ads on Kijiji, and you're asking other realtors.
Craigslist was actually
Craigslist.
Craigslist. We still use kind of Craigslist, but now Kijiji's taken over. But yeah, I
Yeah.
was Craigslist was huge, and it's like that was our bread and butter. Like literally, it was like it changed the whole face of renting properties.
Yeah.
Blasting pictures, allowing you to put pictures of a property, not just one, and like if people can see it and they can contact you through email. They don't have to call you and just hang up the phone. You tell them the price, everything's there listed. It was, and pretty much what we do on MLS right now. And it's just like that's why it was an easy transition because I was already doing this stuff without being a realtor for like 10 years.
Yeah. And how did you vet the tenants back then? What was that process like for you?
So one of the biggest things I would say was me meeting them, like so first off, if you didn't answer your phone or you were late to our meetings, you're out. Done. Like that was I know it sounds simple, but it's like, but if you're late for this important meeting where you're gonna live, you're gonna be late with my rent. It's simple as that, right? And then once they were there too, I had a rental application. So my mother had purchased this thing years and years ago, and she never used it once because, again, my dad was a landlord. It was on a computer, and it had like a rental application, it had the actual lease and everything in there, and it was just a Word documents which she used. So while I was in there, I would have two or three people at the same time, and just kind of feel and see how they would interact with each other. Was a big one. How they interacted with me, how they responded to me, because that's a big one, right? You get because there's other people in the building. You got to make sure that they meshed well. And then I would give them while I was on site. We used to have a BlackBerry, or it was my Nokia, but anyway, it was saved on my phone. And I was like, if you're interested, I would email them the application right there, and I would say I need a credit score with that, some proof of employment, and fill out the rental application. I'll call your references, and you knew right away. Like so if somebody just never responds to that email, as soon as you said rental application, oh, I have this ridiculous story about this guy. But anyway, I'll tell you short in a second. But I would send it out, and yeah, most of the time for the people that were terrible tenants, you never hear back from them. And it was just an easy way to vet through them, and because you're seeing them too. And then sometimes you had two or three people against each other, and there was some competition, and they would give you more than your rental application. So there you would still do your usuals, call your references and check the credit checks and all that stuff too. But this was the extra added step I used, and it was great.
Yeah, I think that's awesome, and it's something now. Like, obviously, we are realtors, and if and I always tell landlords like they can do this themselves. I do tell them that, and as long as they go through all the checks and the processes, they're willing to answer the calls and go through the due diligence of it, which is what we would do, to represent them. But I think it's a great lesson that you've done it, and I think now. Um, with properties on, you can use Kijiji, Facebook Marketplace, you can use all these avenues as well as MLS, and MLS just gives you also more reach. But there's all different options to do it, and but as a landlord, you do have to go through all those steps. I think you made a few really awesome points there. Like quick recap is to meet them in person, see how they respond to your email, see how they respond, if they're prompt, if they're on time, and all that stuff, and try to get a feel of them from that as well. And I think that it goes a long way for sure. And now, so now you've been going through the rental process or the rental property journey for a long time, and now you got your license. Now you're a realtor. And just for anyone listening, David's just over 6 years. He's top 2% nationally for Royal LePage.
I think it's seven. I think this May was, I think, my seventh year, and I've been top 2% the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, so top 2% Royal LePage executive circle. Pretty incredible journey over like 6 7 years, which is an incredible trajectory, and still pushing the envelope. Tell us about when you first got into it, like that transition from, okay, now you're changing, and um, Nat said it's time to become a realtor, and you were like, all right, let's do it. What was that like?
So my whole thing was like, okay, I'll get my license, and when I got packaged out, I got my license fairly quickly, and it was just like my whole goal was, make sure my kids' lives didn't change. So I need to make at least the same amount of money that I made in real estate that I was making as an analyst. And that was, that was my goal. I never thought about awards. I never thought about it. I didn't even know how much realtors make. I had no idea. And people laugh at me, like, what do you mean? I'm like, I just didn't know, right? I never really calculated, never thought about it. So I never thought about it. Like, I didn't even think about awards. And I remember my first year, when it was, awards time. And at this point, I actually, like, I don't know if it was the whole year or not. And I remember emailing Catherine in my office, and I was like, "Did I win an award?" I'm like, "Because I'm just." She starts laughing. She goes, "Yeah, you won gold." I'm like, "Oh, it's just like, pretty good. I think my first year. I think you won
Yeah.
gold your first year too." And it was like, "Oh, I didn't know, right? I didn't really realize into how much money realtors made until like I sold a property. My clients bought a property for $600,000. And it was like, oh, okay. And I calculated, like, so if I only have to do this, 6 or 7 times in order for me to equal how much money I made for a whole year, and I can do it, I'm like, so that kind of the light bulb kind of went on in my head a little bit, right? And then when I made that first award, so I don't kind of go back and forth a little bit, but it was kind of hand in hand, right? So I didn't know how much they're making. I made this, like, okay, if I only could do this. So I kind of wanted to do that stretching. And all of a sudden I got gold because I didn't know awards. I didn't know who made awards. I just thought like the top percentage made awards because like in hockey, like not everybody gets an award. Only like the MVP gets an award really at the end of the year, or top goalie, top forward, top defenseman. It's like maybe 5, 6 guys, not based on how much money you made. And I was like, oh, okay. And then that kind of like, so then it was like, I still, by the time then the next year won like the platinum award, and I still wasn't focused. I'm like, what does that mean? And they're like, okay. And I still didn't know how awards worked at this point. So it was kind of like, and based on tiers and everything. And then I think even, and I was like, oh, okay, good. And then but I never tracked it. And then when I made the top 2% the third year, it was like, okay, I still had no idea what this meant. Like, okay, you made this amount of money. They made like, I'm like, oh, okay. But it wasn't until recently, and I was like, okay, when I was getting the same award a couple of years, I'm like, I need to do that. Like, I was always pushing myself, and I would make my own sets standards. But like, where last year, like 2021, I was almost in the 1%. I missed out by like, $30,000, $40,000. I forget what it was. I was like, fuck, like, sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on this podcast, but anyways,
Yeah.
but I was fucking, like, I could have, like, I was so close, and that's what really started getting longer. And I was top 10 agents in Ontario last year. And I was like, that kind of got the fire going. I'm like, holy shit, I can do this. Like it was, I don't know. It was just kind of one of those things. It just kind of like, I just want to do it to do it. It was like, now and that kind of drives me, like we're goalies, like we always want to win. We always want, like, we're always been the top of our game. And it's like, now it's like, oh, we're getting closer and closer and closer. So for me, it's like a hockey. It has nothing to do with money. It has nothing to do with recognition. It's just, just something that's like you've already achieved here. So you always want to get better. And that's kind of what drives me.
Yeah, there's two things I want to unpack there. First of all, you mentioned hockey, and like in this podcast, I don't know, I want to interview kind of everybody, but with a bit of a focus on any athlete who's gone into real estate and stuff like that as well. And I think this is something that might go overlooked or is like athletes by nature typically always want to push the envelope, and it's always like a what's next mentality. I know it sounds strange, but it's like, okay, you play at this level, you want to get to the next level, you play, and like you always are kind of pushing before the time you're supposed to get there, kind of thing. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's like
100%. You
you play
overachieve before, yeah,
you
before you
play
get
junior, you want to play like pro, you play pro, you want to play AHL.
the
You
next
play
level, bro.
AHL, you
Yeah.
want to play NHL. You play NHL, like you want to be like all-star NHL. Like you just keep wanting to like push the envelope and keep it moving. So I think that's a huge lesson there is how you get an award, and of course they give out awards and stuff, but it's like you're still trying to push the envelope, and you don't even know like what the awards mean. You're just like, all right, well, what's the next like color in the in the spectrum? Like, what's the next? Okay, gold, like let's go platinum, let's go like whatever next after that. But so I think that's pretty awesome. And then let's talk a little bit about how you got there. Like, what are some of the tools that you've implemented to build your business to, for those of you that don't know, like David's got a really awesome office on Bloor West there. And, what has that process been like from where you started to like systems you've put into place or elements that you've put into place to get you to the level that you're at today?
Yeah, well, there's a lot to unpack on that one. So it started. Um, the journey started with Royal LePage Signature and Sam Hewitt, who kind of like talked to us, and she was like basically teaching us how to make money, basically, because no one ever teaches you how. Once you get your license, I don't think people realize this. It's not like another career where you go and you do something. When it comes to sales, like nobody teaches you where real estate how to make money. They just teach you basically how to not get sued. Make sure you're covering your client's ass and your ass, and that's what they're doing, right? But nobody tells you how to find that business once you get that client. Like, how do you find them, right? So I think one of the reasons when I was talking to Michael about our office, I think they're second to none for that. They constantly are helping. There's lots of support. They help you with any questions there. So at the time, Sam Hewitt, she was the one bringing us in and doing the courses and teaching us that. And from there, then I ended up getting a coach who told us, I ended up hiring Rob Vivian, which I just stopped a relationship about a month ago after like 7 years. And the only reason why is that because it's like his systems I outgrew, because his systems were great for a new agent. So it started off being like, okay, guys, it's like, showing you how to door knock and talking to people and going that. And while I was doing this, I'm like, I kind of felt sometimes like a little used car salesman sometimes, because you had a script and what to say and what to do. And I was just like, so I started thinking about things to do things a little bit differently. And his whole thing was like, oh, you don't need to spend money and stuff too. And I'm like, I don't know about that. So like I would do things like, you know, I would throw in things. When I first got my first listing appointment, I said, what can I do differently from here as opposed to somebody else? So my wife, which is very talented and always moving, like very talented aesthetically, like very good at art, very good at pictures, always, decorated our house amazing. And I was like, Nat, moving forward, her name's Natalie. Me and Michael keep saying her name is Natalie or Nat. And I'm Nat. I'm like, you're going to be my hidden weapon. And she's like, what do you mean, my secret weapon? I'm like, what do you mean by that? I was like, nobody else is doing this staging stuff. You've staged properties stuff too. I'm going to bring you in as a design consultant. I'm not going to tell anybody you're my wife, but it's part of my package. She's like, okay. So eventually people knew it was my wife and it was up too. So in the beginning, like 7 years ago, no one was really staging a lot of properties. And they're staging, they're doing like these shitty things, right? We went to some properties that are just horrendous and they're like, this needs staging, right? So she was starting that. So we started staging. I started throwing it in. I didn't add any money in there. This is what, and I said, some places were dirty. And I'm like, oh, so I ended up our house at the time that we were living at was pretty cute, and we had a number of the commercial shot at our house, and we had this amazing cleaning crew come in. And I'm like, do you do like real estate cleaning? They're like, yeah, well, absolutely. So I started adding her to my package. Again, not charging my clients anymore. And like, so she come in before shots and pictures and clean everything up before we did pictures. And then so I was kind of doing that, and I was always looking at, well, what about pictures and all this. So I was always looking for the next thing. Um, so I started doing well that way because it was my life. Then we started buying staging furniture, and then I was like, okay, so I already had a warehouse furniture. I had the wife to stage stuff too. So we started. My buddy and I used to pack up the cars. We used to go to my storage locker. We'd bring it to the property. Natalie would tell us where the things to go, and we'd stage it. The last piece of the puzzle, what took a while, was like finding a good photographer and videographer and somebody does drones and stuff. And it was just everybody has their own. Like the guy that I use, I know you have your own, Michael, and it's like we finally found a guy who would do stuff that did the whole package. And I also did a course which was all about video, because we're saying how the next level is video, video, video. So nobody else was doing. So by this time I did the video course, everyone started doing staging. So thinking like, what's the next thing I can do? And I jumped on the video thing right away. So I started talking to videos. I'm like, not just talking to videos. I wanted to tell the house's story. So I started telling the story, and I can only do that because in an MLS listing here in Toronto, all you get is about 450 characters. You try to tell a story in that, and most of the time agents just list what has the house. Like they don't tell the house's story. There's so much left to be uncovered that somebody's going to want to buy this house. So I started doing that, telling stories, longer videos. The stories became like little HGTV shows, right? And at that time too, I also hired this guy to teach me. He was from New York. He was a Academy Award nominee. He was like, I'm gonna do some commercials and stuff with you. He taught me how to do this stuff in videos and started doing this on my own. So it's like, so when we started doing this. Uh, Somebody had messaged me on Facebook and said, hey, like there's an open casting call for this new HGTV show. And I'm like, okay. They're like, I think you should put your name in there. We've seen you what you're doing on your video. And I'm like, okay. So this video I got from this guy from New York, I submitted that, And I got a call back. Didn't hear anything for like 6 months. I got a call back again in the April, like, you got the gig. So that also led to, I'm like, okay, great. So because of my videos and everything I was doing differently, it led me to get the HGTV show. So I was one of the co-hosts on that show, Hot Market, and things just kind of snowballed from there. And then I got in 2021, 2020 started hit, and where other people started to scale back the business, I put more money into my business. So my assistant and I had two virtual assistants at the time because I started to get busy. I said, okay, listen, we need to revamp my website. I want to do this. I want to revamp, based on our processes, like things, simple things like we have all these systems set in place that when you list a property, bang, 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 they already do it. I'm like, okay, let's put this in a systematic format. Okay, boom, we're going to do this. Okay, when a client sells or buys a property, they're going to start getting cookies on one end. I wanted to go on their birthdays, so we started to set the system for that. On Christmas time, then they go to Christmas listings. You're on there too. Okay, now we need to start doing that. So we started figuring things out, and then I got so busy that my assistant, you know, she no longer could do the job she was doing with me. Like, she was in Nova Scotia. She also wanted to get her license. And then so I said, okay, I need to hire a full-time assistant. So she helped me go through that journey. At the same time, in 2020, we had to do an audit on some of my mother's commercial properties. At this point, my dad had passed away, and one of them happened to be one in Bloor West, which had novel tube wiring, all that. So I said, this is a perfect opportunity for me. My wife and I were looking to buy a commercial property at the time. I said, well, why should I look outside the house? I'm going to eventually want to buy this property. I said to my mother, I said, hey, like, let me take over the property. I will renovate it, obviously, and then I will actually rent more than the current tenants are renting, and you'll have a brand new product. So that's what we did. And since then, we've grown the business and brought in some agents. And
Awesome.
yeah, I know there's a lot in there, but it's just
Yeah.
hopefully that wasn't too long. But it's been an interesting journey. Now I met the two girls I bring in, like, I mentor them. It's not like a team per se. Like, we all are on have our own names. I always want to do things a little bit differently. I didn't want to bring in somebody who's just going to be, I always have to feed all the time. I'm like, no, I want to bring in somebody that wants to have their own name. You bring in your own business. You, like, I can help you with something. So if I have a listing or something comes, of course I'm giving them business, but it's like, but I don't want that to be your sole source of income, because I need you to be strong in the sense of, so if I want this business to go where I want it to go, I need strong people behind me that I'm able to leave, go on vacation, and not worry if my clients are suffering. I also eventually, maybe 10, 15 years, I want to get rid of my book and pass my book on to you and make sure my clients are taken care of. So I brought them in and started mentoring them in the way that I kind of do things. We set up, so my assistants are basically make sure the systems are set up the way they do. Now we do, like, now part of their job is also we do tons of events for giving back to the people. As you know, this year we just did one at Rene Park here, in which we had Santa Claus. It was Christmas time. We had Santa Claus. So with professional photographer. Last year we also had a videographer, but that was just more for me. So this year we had a professional photographer. We had a decorating for cakes. We had a whole station with coffee and lots of booze to put in there. We had a food truck, which all the kids liked and stuff. And there's just tons of games everywhere. So giveaways. And even with the weather was being terrible as was, we had a huge turnout. Then at Easter, we did the same thing with, like, Easter egg hunt for the kids. Mother's Day, we did a mimosa and manicures at my office. Father's Day, we did a cigar and scotch night. Family Day, we sent things out on instead of Thanksgiving for Halloween. I sent all my clients a nice little care package with, which I also always try to help my friends. Was one of my friends has one of she's actually Natalie's staging assistant, so she does all my staging. She started this new candle business. And I messaged her, I'm like, hey, do you do skulls? Because I love skulls. I have skulls all over my
Yeah.
office. I love them. And she's like, absolutely. So she did a whole batch of skulls. We sent it to my clients. So I was just trying to do things instead of just hoarding money. It's like, as you know, Michael, anytime you have any questions, I'd like to give back, whether it's knowledge or money or, like, whatever it is. I just constantly, like, try to give back. And that's one of the things I'd like to do with some of the people who are starting business. Like, how can I help you? Is there some way I can incorporate this in something like business? And that's what I've been doing. So there's a
Yeah.
lot of systems we have set up in there.
It's incredible. Obviously, it's a well-oiled machine now, and it's taken a long time. Like, it's taken you, 6-7 years. Like, I said it originally, like, it's not a long time to get to the level you're at, but when you think about it from a business perspective, like, it is, it's a better part of a decade when you think about it, how you built everything together. And I think it's incredible to see like where it's at, and it's just a well-oiled machine now, and you had to go through stuff to get everything in place the way I'm sure it's where it's at, where you want it to be at now,
We're
and then
always
it's
changing. We're always looking for the new
yeah,
things. So we're constantly moving things in and out. Like, we're some systems we were using in the past we no longer use. We're trying to update them. Like, it's again, it's always it's a living, breathing entity in itself,
yeah,
like the systems you said. And so whenever, like, we talked about this even in the podcast, like, I'm doing my own podcast, we're doing things different, we're also adding that in there to just give more value back to people. Like, it's one of those things, and I love the fact that you're doing this. I think this is amazing because I think a lot of people can learn a lot about real estate yourself, and it's just giving back them like a little bit of knowledge goes a long way.
yeah. That's the goal, right? It's how do we keep giving back, and you want to also make the people that are making these decisions with you. You want to make them feel like you care about them too, and that I think that's a big thing as well. Like that sometimes goes overlooked, and you take the time to do these events and make sure that you can say hi to people in a non-business setting and stuff like that, which is great. And I think it's awesome. Sam Hewitt, I'm sure, who's going to check this out, will also probably love this because she's big on that stuff too. And no, it's pretty incredible to see your journey, and where it's at, and I'm excited to watch it as it goes along. And obviously, I do appreciate our conversations and all the help you've given me along the way too. And that's why I thought you'd be a great guest on the podcast. And I know a lot of people that are listening will get a ton of value out of this. And if you are a new realtor, uh, it sounds like there's a lot there to unpack, and there is, but it's part of the journey of one step at a time and building it over 6 7 years, and you'll keep pushing the envelope to make things better.
Well,
uh
the one thing we didn't say is how many things we failed at, right? There's
yeah,
tons of things that just didn't work out. Like, literally, you tried, like, like, I spent too much money doing that. Like, listen, at the end of the day, that you don't, when you fail, you don't fail. You learn, right? You always got to take that with a grain of salt. Like, yeah, we won't do that. Let's change this, and it makes something better. So don't be afraid to try things. And it's like, it's not always a money thing. It might be just something that we didn't like the situation. That's what, like, one thing I think Sam always said to me. She's like, I love the fact that we say give you a suggestion and you try it, and you make it your own.
yeah, that's a great point too. It's like that fail forward mentality where it doesn't work, but at least I think there's a lot of value in actually trying. And I think that's where people sometimes, and myself included, like sometimes you get afraid to try stuff. And even with this podcast, it's like I'm just gonna do it. I don't know anything about podcasting, but here we are. It's just gonna do it and try it. And there's gonna be some technical difficulties along the way, but it is what it is. It's just part of in
Absolutely.
in 100 episodes, hopefully get you back on and we can have another conversation. And if that's a couple years from now, after an episode every couple weeks, it is what it is, and we'll see where we're at then. uh, David, where can people get a hold of you? Where can they connect with you? Where can they watch your stuff on Instagram and YouTube, which if you haven't checked that stuff out, it is awesome. So where can they reach out to you?
Yeah, so I'm on all platforms. Most of the time, it's like, for example, Instagram, it's David V. Cinelli _ Realtor. I try to keep the same name with my TikTok, and I'm on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube. If you just even Google me, David Cinelli Realtor, I pop up there too. If you ever want a phone call, I get my phone number to everybody. I do answer the phone. It's 416-876-9998. Sorry, my lights are on these sensors. They kind of
It's
go
all
on
good.
and off, so okay. Yeah, so you can always call or text me. I mostly answer text messages, to be honest with you. Sometimes if we don't write, a lot of times you get some spam phone calls you don't always answer. So feel free to DM me or text message me, and I always like to respond. I just had a conversation with my cousin the other day, and he goes, it's always a race. He goes, when I text you, see how fast you can answer me. And I'm like, I don't do it on purpose, and I do tend to answer text messages fairly quickly, because if I don't do it, you get buried. So it's just one of those things. I try to answer as quickly as I possibly can. So yeah.
Yeah,
As long
that's
as it's
awesome.
not like 1 o'clock in the morning and then I'm usually sleeping.
Yeah, that's true. I've been early nights, early mornings. That's my new routine now. So hope to keep it going.
Yeah, I try to get to bed like a decent hour these days, and because I wake up at 6, like sometimes before, because what people don't realize, I think, with our job is like you have to set a good schedule in order to be successful, right? And we always have to work out. I mean, you talk about our workouts, we do different times. I work out like this morning my trainer came, like, she was here a little later than I started. Usually start at 7:30. Usually I start at 7 because I'm done by 8:30. Because I have to drop my kids off at school and do all the other stuff too. So there's a lot of things to get busy. But yeah, setting schedule. But now I try to be in bed for 10:30, but it doesn't always work that way.
Yeah, that's the thing. It doesn't always work out, but at least you try to stay on the schedule. Listen, David, it's so awesome to have you on. I know everyone's going to really enjoy this, and for everyone out there listening, if you're watching on YouTube, if you can like and subscribe. If you're on Apple Music or Spotify, definitely leave us a review, and hope to bring you guys more episodes. Have a great one.